Hello, Malcolm here, and welcome to Tuesday Teaching Tips. This is episode 319, and it is the latest in our current series on the 10 commandments of effective preaching and teaching. Not preaching and teaching itself, but effective preaching and teaching. Don't you and I want to be more effective? More like what it says about Paul and Barnabas in Acts chapter 14, that they spoke so effectively that a great number of Jews and Greeks believed. That's the aim. Whether you're an inexperienced speaker or someone like me who's been doing it for decades, we can all grow in our effectiveness. And I'm hoping these tips will help us to make progress to becoming more and more effective. Now, before we get into the tips for today, let me offer a point of clarification or context to do with timing, because that's our topic today. Respect the time, not your time, the time of those listening to you. Reflect on the fact that Jesus sometimes spoke quite briefly. Looks like some of those parables were spoken just on their own, in a sense, just a few minutes. Other times he spoke at length. The Sermon on the Mount, the 3 days of teaching leading up to the feeding of the 4,000 in Mark chapter 8. The Apostle Paul spoke for several hours in Acts chapter 20, verse 7. So I would contend that there is no such thing as a universally ideal length for a lesson. It all depends on the context and the skill of the speaker. In other words, it depends partly on your skills, but partly also on the needs and the context of the people you're speaking to. I don't subscribe to the idea that the perfect length of a lesson is 15 minutes or 20 minutes. TED Talks can do what they want, not a problem, but that's a TED Talk context. If your church service is like a TED Talk context, then that might work for you, but it doesn't have to. We need to think about what's appropriate for every lesson's a bit different. And what's the right length for this lesson might not be the same as the right length for the lesson I might teach next week or in a different situation with different people. Some people can be captivating for an hour or more. Others struggle to be captivating for 10 minutes. So know your skill level and your giftedness is part of this. A wise speaker will have a sober estimate of their ability to hold an audience's attention and a healthy respect for the occasion and what is appropriate. So these tips will focus on helping us to speak generally shorter rather than longer. And the reason for that is not because shorter is necessarily better than longer, but because the tendency of many speakers, including yours truly, is to go too long more often than to go too short. So that's what we're going to focus on. And I have 10 tips for you today, so let's rattle through them. 10 tips to help you respect the time of your listeners. Number 1. If you are a visiting speaker, find out how long they want you to speak for and speak for that length. I have on occasion done this well, and on occasion, including recently, done it badly. It's not respectful to the people you're speaking to go longer than they are asking you to go for. A minute over time is not a big deal. 5-10 minutes could create a major problem for the organizers of the event and for the people there. So find out what it is they would like you to do and stick to it. Secondly, if the venue is stuffy or really hot or really cold, much more so than usual, err on the short side. You, if you're cold, may be able to work up some energy and heat by your speaking, but the people sitting there are going to be shivering if it's really cold. Or if it's too hot, you might be able to cope because you're excited about what you're speaking about, but the people listening to you, they're having to suffer in the heat and suffer the fact that you're not connecting with them anymore. Or if it's just a stuffy room with no ventilation, it's going to affect concentration levels, so go shorter rather than longer. Thirdly, find out if something is scheduled for after your presentation, your talk, or your lesson. Finish in good time so that that event or that next part of the service is not compromised. It's not fair on someone who's got a 15-minute communion talk and who spent 5 hours on it to then have to shorten it to 2 minutes because you went long when they put all that investment of time in. So find out what's happening next. Fourthly, be clear on your main point. Be clear. Lessons tend to go long when we're not so clear why we're speaking and what our main point is, and then we waffle. Fifthly, leave your audience wanting more. Make that your aim. People are rarely annoyed if speakers finish early. They are frequently annoyed if they finish late. I don't think I've ever had anybody come up to me and give me a challenge or a rebuke because I went too short. That's never happened. Conversely, I have had people give me their opinion on the overly long nature of some of my lessons, and I think they were probably right. Number 6, practice your talk. Time yourself. On the day, you may not keep to that exact time, but at least you'll know roughly. If you practice your talk and it's 30 minutes and it needs to be 15, you know you've got a major problem. If you practice your talk and you do 30 minutes and you're meant to do 30 minutes and then on the day you do 32, that's fine. Number 7, If your habit is to go too long, if that's the norm, then listen to some of your previous talks. Listen to yourself. Notice the kind of material you could cut out. For example, do you use more illustrations than necessary? Are you repeating yourself? Listen to your own class, see where you could cut some things out and take note of that and act on it. Number 8, use a timer. Set an alarm on your watch, your smartphone or something, and put it there, right there on the lectern where you can see it counting down and you can hear it when it goes off. And it's a little bit strange when that happens if you're not used to it, and your audience may be feeling like, why have they done that with a timer? And you hopefully won't have to do it every time you speak because you'll get used to the idea of speaking shorter, but it can be a really helpful discipline to know that in 25 minutes, that thing is going to go off and I'm going to need to be finished by then. Number 9, identify material in your presentation that you could cut out if necessary. Sometimes I do this. I look through my lesson, I think it's all important, but this illustration or this point, it's not central to my lesson, so I put a little bracket around it, usually in like a marker pen, knowing that if necessary, when I get to that point, if I'm behind my time, then I can just leave that out. You'll know which bits to skip if you need to by doing that. And number 10, and finally, pray. Pray to be disciplined. Pray to be sensitive to your audience. It's their time, not yours. If you go 15 minutes too long, that's only 15 minutes of your time. But if you're speaking to 40 people, that's 10 hours of the collective time that you have taken up. So ask God to help you to be effectively submissive to the needs of your listeners rather than in love with your own material. Listen, I have broken all these commandments and I'm not taking these tips seriously myself many a time. So I'm not sitting up on my high horse here, but I do know that these things can help. And maybe at least one of them is one that you could employ to help you to be more disciplined with your timekeeping and respect the time of those who are listening to you. So what do you think about these tips? What's missing? Which ones interest you the most or do you find useful? Perhaps you want to employ one and let me know how it goes. I'd be very interested to hear about your experience. Next week, we're going to go on to the 5th commandment. Great learning is more important than great teaching. By the way, I would encourage you to consider joining the AIM UK and Ireland program that's coming up to develop your understanding of Scripture. The next module we're doing is homiletics, which is about the preparation and delivery of lessons, very appropriate for these classes. So please consider joining us. If you type in AIM UK and Ireland, all one word, you'll find us, and the link is in the show notes. Please leave a comment on this week's topic. We learn best when we learn in community. If you've got any questions, drop me a line, malcolm@malcolmcox.org. If you'd like a free copy of my ebook on spiritual disciplines, then just sign up for my newsletter on the website, malcolmcox.org. Please pass this link on to anybody who might benefit. Subscribe, hit the notification button, and I'd be very grateful for that. So I do hope you find these tips useful. And until the next time, remember, keep calm and carry on teaching. Take care. God bless.